Welcome to the Sober Heathen podcast. I am the Sober Heathen, man. I went ahead and tried to do some editing and adding some things to the podcast. So I hope that intro looked pretty good. New music, but yeah, I'm doing some editing. I'm doing some things I said I'd never do. But here we are, trying to make it a little bit more appealing to the eyeballs, and for those of you that watch. So those of you that are here with us already, thank you. I'm going to go right into it, man. I'm going to bring Daryl in. Daryl's our guest. Daryl, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, man. So I'm excited to hear more about this. I haven't seen a lot of your content until we kind of met, and I'm reading through it, and I'm really digging. What did Dennis Miller always say? The cut of your jib. So tell us a little bit about yourself, man. A little bit about your story.
Sure. Grew up in the Midwest, great state of Michigan. I was raised in a very blue collar family, and raised with, my dad was a mechanic, Navy veteran. It was a fairly tough environment. I'd say my dad was a tough dude, but my mom might have been a little bit tougher. So, and whatever, it is what it is. We grow up how we grow up. So I have no qualms with anything in terms of how I grew up. But, a quick story on, just getting sober and that sort of thing. I was young when I first took my first drink, and quite frankly, it was the best day of my life, probably up to that point. I was a decent kid, and I was taught a lot of, the right things, I think, and except for, how to have self-esteem and how to, feel good and all that sort of stuff. And that's fine too. Like, at some point we have to take responsibility for learning all that ourselves. So, I progressed from the drinking to the drugs and, to the dealing, and, just got in trouble and did things that were completely against the grain of what I was taught, and me and my life. And, when I share my story, I think it's most important, at least in my opinion. It's different for everybody, and that's cool. But we all, in my opinion, we relate on the level of emotion and where we were from that perspective, and where our heads were. And I was a miserable, insecure, troublemaking kid who was just heading downhill real fast. When I was 18, I was confronted and it just like, hey, you really need to go talk to a drug counselor, this and that. And I was wavering. Should I do it? Should I not do it? I was scared to death. I didn't want to tell anybody the truth. I was, just not in a good spot, obviously. And I ended up going to do it. And I talked to him, and I was planning on lying to him. And he intimidated the hell out of me. I was 18 years old, I was a kid. So he intimidated me, and I told him the truth to the best of my ability at that point. And whatever that was. And at the end, I was like, "What do you think, Doc?" And he's, "Well, I need to put you in drug treatment, alcohol treatment." So anyway, that's just after I turned 19, and been doing my best to live ever since.
Wow. It's incredible sometimes that you talk about, connecting on an emotional level, man. That could have been my story. The only thing that would have been different would have been I didn't drink until I was 21. But the self-esteem issues, they were there. I was in my family, I was always the good kid. I was going to be, oh, well, he's the favorite. He's goody-goody or whatever. But there were things going on inside of me that I didn't have anybody to talk to, and once I tasted that, just like you said, it was quite possibly the best feeling of my life. That I think the big book does say that pretty well. The ease and comfort that came with that first drink, man, that was something else.
Yeah, it was. I was 13, I think, but I was at a little party and there were high school kids there, and I was there with a friend of mine who's the same age as me. And, I remember just feeling that sort of euphoric feeling. And then, but it started me, doing something stupid. I started throwing peanuts in this kid in high school's drink, and I did it once, and he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I did it twice. And he's like, you know what, you better knock it off. I did it again. And he was ready to beat the hell out of me. So, it was just, and, then the stupid stuff just goes from there. So, that's just the way it goes. And anyway, so now we're sober, right? And that's the interesting part. Like, what do we do?
Right. Yeah. And I'm getting some comments here real quick. And just I don't know what's going on with my sound, if there's an issue with it or not. So hopefully we can make it through and have it not be too much of a distraction. Yeah, do the best we can. So you wrote a book, and the joy of getting my head out of my ass, that really stuck with me too, because I had a counselor who, your first day in treatment, you sat down in this chair in this group room, and he put on these plastic gloves, and he said, you know what a colonoscopy is? And everyone's like, yeah. And he's like, all right, undo your pants. And so you're sitting there, and you're like, do I undo my pants? What is this freak doing, And so most of the guys, they unbutton their pants while they're sitting there, and he comes up behind them, and he grabs them by the head with the gloves on, and he looks at the group, and he says, what's he got? And everybody that's been there for a minute, they know to say optorectalitis. What is that? A shitty outlook on life. What does he need to do? Pull his head out of his ass. And that was kind of your initiation. So talk a little bit about the book, man. The joy of getting your head out of your ass. Talk a little bit about
it. It's my story. It's my journey, my path, and it's told through the stories of my life, from being young to, till today, basically. And, it's about dysfunction. It's about addiction. It's about taking risks. It's about recovery. It's about freedom, life, for me, how I was able to have a better one than I had before. How to come from a tumultuous sometimes and fairly humble beginnings to a life that honestly I wake up every day and I love, and I think that's the key. So, it's about winning. It's about losing, mostly losing. It's about a lot of failures, and a few successes. And the most important part to me about the book is, I'm not a preachy guy. I don't care what anybody else does in terms of how they conduct their sobriety. What I wanted to do was tell my story. And if that helps some people, which is my intent is giving back. And, that's what I want to do. I want to help some folks. So.
Yeah. I'm not a writer. I can barely put a resume together. So I chose to do the podcast, and I started out by just doing exactly that, just telling a little bit about my story and just getting it out there. And I don't know about you, and I'm sure you have, every little response that you get from somebody saying, hey, I really appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate your vulnerability, man. That really just means the world. And, so you made this decision, and your journey started in recovery at 19, man. That's a really young age to do that. What was the biggest influence on that, to make that decision that young?
It was interesting because I don't, that's a hard question to answer because I didn't know what the hell was going on. I really didn't. I was so young, and, making that decision to go into treatment, it was basically going to treatment or just be disowned by a lot of people that cared about me. That was my perspective at the time. And, when you mix that insecurity with, wanting to please people and wanting to not get caught and wanting to, portray this image of, well, he used to be, fairly intelligent. He used to be decent in sports, that kind of thing. Like I didn't want to let anybody down. So,
Right.
that was a big thing for me. And so, the decision was almost, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And the frame of reference I had was one of my buddies who went to treatment for, I think it was when he went to a 6-month treatment. And, as soon as he got back, he was with us partying. That was my frame of reference at that point. And so I went, and I always like to say the two things I got out of treatment were, one was AA, and the other was hope. The other was hope that I didn't have to be miserable. I didn't have to, have my head down. I didn't have to, always be around someone and be partying to feel good. I didn't always have to, just hurt. And so the hope was a big thing for me that, hey, I'm gonna actually try this.
Yeah, hope is such a huge thing, and when you can find it, you got to grab onto it. And that's, I think that's why it's so important for people to focus on every positive that you do every single day when you're trying to beat this thing. In Austin Powers, Fat Bastard says, I eat because I'm unhappy, and I'm unhappy because I eat. Well, I drank because I was unhappy, and then I was unhappy because I drank. It was like a helpless, we talked about this last time live. It's like a helpless trap. It's like I couldn't figure out how else to live. I didn't know how to live without it, but I wanted to live without it, and so, yeah, it's such a battle.
It is, the battle is certainly, there's the big sort of gorilla in the room, right? With the drinking and the drugs. And then you put that stuff down, however that happens for anybody. And then the rest of the lifelong sort of, and I don't want to say battle, because it's a battle for a while, but then it becomes less of a battle, and then it becomes less of a battle. And, and that's, for me, that's the really cool thing about sobriety is, I can, at that point, when I put that stuff down, then I have the opportunity to build my life, to help myself with my life, and to seek help with my life, and to listen, and to be humble, and to not think I know it all, and all that sort of
Sure.
stuff. And, it's all just learning over time, right? I mean,
yeah,
I think a big thing for me, and even podcasts, like I'm not a public facing guy. Like, this is not an easy thing for me to do in terms of just, I'm not this guy. So, but I like doing it because it makes me uncomfortable, and instead of just shirking all of the discomfort, which is what I used to do, which is what my life was about. Like, let me just get away from the discomfort. It helps sometimes to embrace it. And especially if the intent is to give back. And I think that's the important part for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, being humble too. Yeah. I like that. When I first, earlier in my recovery, not that I'm that far in there, I'm not years and years and years. I'm coming up in a year and a half, maybe a little more now, but
it's awesome.
When I started, I dove right into AA. I've showed my big books on social media before. They look like rainbows with all the tabs and the highlights and all the stuff, And when I first got in, I thought, all right, I have to let everybody know how much I know about it, and I have to regurgitate all the lines that are being said. And then so that became kind of exhausting. That became for a minute, for a couple months, that became my thing. And then I started to struggle. And then I got back to, okay, I don't know is one of the best answers that you can possibly say when you're having an honest conversation. And I tried to live by I don't know, because I want to learn more. And that's why, on my account, I've got in some back and forth with some people. But they might be right, because I don't know everything. So I want to have these discussions, right? Even the tough ones. So yeah, I think being humble is absolutely important.
That's really cool. I'm such an advocate. I love telling the story, and I think it's a really important one in terms of, it was certainly in terms of my sobriety, but and hopefully it helps some other folks. But there was I'm pretty sure it was a Friday night meeting at the community center, and this was back in Michigan when I was just getting sober, and there was this older gentleman named Jimmy, and he was older. He was kind of a fairly slight dude. He was a little hunched over, and his age was definitely showing, and but he was like, at that point he was like 40 years sober. So all of us young clowns, which we were at that point. I mean, many of us wanted to be sober. Some of us were there for other reasons, I think, but which is fine. People do what they do, but Jimmy was kind of like a deity to us. We're like, holy crap, and that was pretty cool. But he was the only guy in that meeting that would, go grab the coffee pot halfway through the meeting and start filling everybody's coffee. And it was the coolest thing ever to watch. And I think about that, and there's these little things that stick in your brain forever and ever, and that's one of the things that has stuck in my brain forever and ever. But one of the things that he used to say around the tables, which goes back to humility, was, he said, if you really want to be sober and you want to stay sober, you have to stay small. You have to be humble. And I think about that all the time. I think about staying small, and listening and understanding that everybody has something to teach me. And sometimes in the disagreement is what I need to learn, and not that I necessarily need to sit there and have arguments with people, because I'm certainly very capable of that, but I don't want to, but there's got to be a seed of something in there that I'm at least willing to listen to.
Right. Yeah. There were 3 questions that same guy who did the head removal exam at treatment, that he said to ask when because our emotions, they kind of come to the forefront, right? That's part of the reason why we chose the path that we chose to begin with. So he said, ask yourself these 3 things when you think that you need to start a confrontation. Question 1 is, does it need to be said? So if you answer yes to that, then you go to question 2. Does it need to be said by me? And then if you can honestly say yes, and you go on to question 3, does it need to be said by me right now? And so unless you can answer yes to all 3 of those, then wait. Let the motion get out of it and revisit it, later in the day, or 15 minutes later, because a lot of times that can change everything. So I really held on to that too, in my approach of in the discussions. So I like to call them discussions. I like to, because that's my intent. But some people look at it as other things. But so, yeah, that's something I've carried with me. So
no, I think that's cool, and I've done, as we all have, just, a whole bunch of stuff in terms of, life stuff since I've been sober. And it's, and normal people sometimes even say that, like, hey, let the emotion come out of it, let the air out of it before you respond, or before you say something that, is fueled by emotion. And I think that's important. And, I've had to have people temper me over the years a lot, in business with, I'd get ready to send an email because I was pissed about something, and I'd have somebody with a clear mind read it for me. Should I send this? Like, no, you should not send that, So I agree with you 100%. And what that counselor said, I think it's true. And we can all do things that are, either, sort of with our grain or against our grain at any given time. And we know if we're fueled by, I know if I'm fueled by emotion or fueled by, and I need to just settle the hell down. So I couldn't agree more with that. I think it's important. So we don't drag somebody into our, or I don't drag somebody into my chaos,
Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of made a rule for myself on X, like, if you hit send, you let it sit, and then you deal with it, because you need to learn if it was emotionally driven, and and I wasn't thinking clearly. I need to learn what other people say. So, but if I don't hit send, I've deleted so many posts. I get on there, I see something, and I start to comment, and I'm like, I kind of go through the questions, and then I delete it. So that's been something that's helped carry me. And doing the podcast has been something that's carried me. So now that you've got the book written, the book's been out there. What do you do? What's your go-to these days that keeps your recovery the strongest?
For me, it's and this, a lot of this stuff is in hindsight, right? It's I
Sure.
look back and I say, sometimes there's things I didn't even know that I was doing that was helping me strengthen my recovery. But as I look back now, I say, if I was going to say to somebody, what do you need to do? It's build a life that you enjoy and build a life that you love to the best of your ability. And that's, and it's not me building stuff outside of myself. And, sometimes that comes along with it, but it's me building inside of myself. So to, answer the question, it's exploring, it's writing. I have a good relationship with my higher power as I understand him. And it's not anybody else's, and I don't want it to be anybody else's, and nobody else probably wants mine.
Sure.
It's something that works for me. So the things that I do are, I can be a pretty, I have a busy mind. I'm always looking to do something. I have a type A personality. I may appear fairly stoic, but I'm a maniac, so for me, I have to settle myself down, and, I really do. And so, I've learned how to do, different ways to breathe. I've learned how to do meditation. There's just, and I'm grateful. I think probably the biggest thing for me is, every day I go through what I'm grateful for, and that's just part of my morning.
Yeah.
And so I don't forget. So if I do that for long enough in my life, it just becomes a thread that's woven into the fabric of me. And, I think that's crucial, for a healthy, happy, and I don't like the word happy. Let's just say contented,
Yeah.
a contented sobriety and a contented life where there is no thought of drinking or drugs or going back to anything like that. There's just not, because
Right.
anyway, I'll leave that there.
No, and then I like to ask that question, and I know it's a hard one to answer, but that's the point. Like, I want people to understand that what worked for Daryl and what worked for Scott, some of it might work for you, but you got to niche your own path. You got to blaze your own trail, and it's really hard to pinpoint what that is, and it's really frustrating. It was really frustrating for me when, looking back now, the honest people were telling me that. You have to, yes, there's certain things that you need to do. You should go to some meetings and talk with your peers. You should, and early on, the steps really helped me get through some things. Therapy really helped me with some things, so those are some building blocks that you can get to it. But, I've struggled tremendously at points. And then there's been times where I even forgot that I was an alcoholic, for periods of time. I walk through the store and I'm not like looking to see how many bottles of peppermint schnapps are on the shelf anymore. And then, I get back in the car. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't even look. You know what I mean? Like that was something that I used to do. So kind of planning out my adventure. So it really sucks for somebody early on to be told, here's what we did, take it or leave it, give it a shot. And when is it going to happen? It's so different for everybody, right? And it's hard to hear, but I think that's the message. If they hear it enough, I hope people can take a little bit of peace with that and say, okay, all right, it didn't happen this fast, but it happened this fast for this guy. It's coming, right?
100%. Yeah. No, I would not try to bestow my way of being sober and, on anyone, because it may not fit their life. It may not fit them. I mean, I agree with you. There are certain building blocks, and I've read the big book 6,000 times, and I've, the 12 and 12, like just eat it up, and I did that for years. And I went to, meetings for years. When I first started, I was going to, one and or two a day, if I could. Um, and that was very important to me. I think, one thing I think is important, when somebody gets sober is to find someone that you would like to emulate or be like. And that's how it worked for me. And it may or may not work for somebody else, but my sponsor, his name was Bud, and he was a guy that was actually, he said to me, and he's the reason why I titled my book the way I did. I'm sure he told me my head was in my ass. There's probably no doubt about that. But he did say to me, when I was wrestling with something, struggling with something, like, my God, how do I deal with this? Or how do I do this? Or, how do I get out of this? Or why am I feeling this? Just fight and fight and fight. And he said, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. And that is why I entitled the book that way. But when I first met Bud, I saw in his eyes something that I didn't have, which was there was peace there and there was humility there. And his sincere desire was to help other people around the tables. And he was probably 15 years sober at that time. So, I listened to him and I wanted to learn from him. And I think that's an important, part of it. But, how long has it been since I've been to a meeting? It's been a long time.
Sure.
And that may not work for everyone, and that may work for some folks, and that's okay.
Yep.
The only person that has to answer the questions about what works for me is me.
Yeah.
And the only person that has to answer the question of what works for them is them.
Right.
It's not, there is no set, program for everybody.
Yeah. Because there's no two lives that are exactly the same. So there's going to be some differences, even with as many similarities as you can find. I find it fascinating, and this is why I love having guests on, because you were talking about this gentleman and, the look in his eyes and the calmness, and he told you to stop, the fighting stops when you stop fighting. There's been a lot of people that influenced me, but when I first started this podcast, one of my first guests was Rich Sullivan. And I use his full name because I don't think that he would mind, but he's on X, and he's highly involved in the recovery community, and he's become a really good friend. I've never seen Rich face to face, only in pictures, right? And he's in Georgia, by the way. And just talking to him, we kind of developed this good friendship. We talked on the phone, we text message. The way he approaches recovery, there's a calmness in his voice. You saw the calmness in this dude's eyes. There's a calmness in Richard's voice where, and this is not a bad thing, he takes life seriously, but he doesn't take it too seriously, right? Like, it's like, brother, let's just live, man. You've been through enough. Stop carrying the weight. There's just such a calming peace from him. And when I started this podcast, the reason why I've kept going is partly because of his encouragement and, the peace that he brought and the discussion. So, again, how do you find that person? By just keep looking. And there's somebody out there that's going to give you that connection you need. I truly believe that connection is the opposite of addiction. And the more connections, the more healthy connections you have, the stronger you're going to be.
Could not agree more. Yeah, I've seen a lot of Rich's stuff. I've never talked to him, but I do we follow each other on X, and I love seeing the things that he says. And I agree. I mean, there's a part in my book where I talk about the ass kicking machine, where we just beat ourselves up for, things that, oh, I'm not doing this right, I'm not doing that right, and that's a hard place. That's a tough place to be. And that's part of the fighting. And that was a big thing for me when I was, earlier in my sobriety. I would I would beat myself up like, oh, I'm not supposed to think that. I'm not supposed to feel that. I'm not supposed to this. I'm not supposed to that. And, until I lightened up, and my sponsor, Bud, was very instrumental in helping me do that. Until I lightened up about life, it was not a great thing. It was, it was difficult. It was very difficult to keep my head. And, when I don't have my head in the right spot, and, and it's mostly the head. I mean, the heart is certainly
Sure.
plays into it, but when I don't have my head in the right spot, I'm in danger. I'm in danger of doing something that I may regret. So I agree with you that, life is, I'm a serious person, but I'm generally either smiling, or laughing on the inside. It may not look like it on the outside, but like
Yeah.
I don't take life that seriously, unless it comes to how I treat other people, and how I am in the world. That's important to me. But little petty annoyances and BS, I'm all set. I don't have time for it.
Yeah. There's a word that I heard in treatment that I really like, that I used to awfulize everything. Everything that would happen, I would awfulize it. Oh my God, this is terrible. Oh my God, why did I do that? Oh, I forgot to do this. Oh, and just compound it and just beat and beat and beat myself into submission. We were doing a live last night, and somebody said sometimes you got to let go of what was and step into what could be. And so it was it's a couple of people probably laughing at me now, but I think it makes sense. That just kind of came out. There's a lot of what could be. And I was looking, there was something popped up the other day about people that made great inventions, or I don't want to say it was the Ford. I want to say it was Henry Ford. It might have been, but they didn't start these businesses until they were like in their 40s, or so. And then look at what they've created now. And that's one hole that I go into. It's like, okay, I'm 42. I'm 8 years from 50. So I'm going to be 50 soon. But when I look at like the weekend, it's Monday, and the weekend's 5 days away. That's so far away. But the 8 years, you know what I mean? That's just, I know a lot of people's minds work that way, but I know that's how my mind works. And that's how I can trick myself into making some really stupid decisions.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a little older. I'm 58, and you know,
You look great, man.
uh, thank you. I mean, it takes time. It's being, and there's the answer for me is always in the middle somewhere. So I can be really difficult with myself, or I can be too easy on myself.
Ooh,
And so there's probably an answer somewhere in the middle of that. Where I can do the best I can do today, and that's all I can do. And sometimes there are days when I don't feel like doing my best, and I just want to lay on the couch and be a vegetable, or whatever. Like I have to be able to give myself permission to
yes.
do those kinds of things. And I think one of my favorite words in the English language is, and I recently discovered this, is the word allow. I have to allow things to be. I have to allow myself mistakes. I have to allow myself some space to, if I feel like not doing it one day, then you know what? I feel like not doing it one day, and I have to allow that for myself. And it's a lifelong process. So, and it's easy to want. For me, I want what I want when I wanted it. Especially when I was younger, uh, and it all comes. It really does. I'm such a fan of continuing to explore, and I'm talking about, inside me and outside me, but continue to explore, continue to try new stuff, continue to do things that I haven't done. And for me, the path unfolds, the path shows up for me.
Yeah.
And that's how it's happened for me for a long time. And that's, part of the things that I'm grateful for.
Yeah. Yeah, allow is a good word. Mine is intent, and I think I mentioned that in on one of your posts today. Like, if I'm going to lay down on the couch because I need that day, I know what my intent is, and my intent is to get that rest that I need. And other people are saying, "Oh, you're lazy, you're this and that." That's on them, right? We 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 react to we don't react to things. We react to our perception of things. So somebody can walk into a room and see you laying on the couch and think, "Oh, lazy bastard." Oh, they don't know that maybe you just got home from the gym, or maybe you're not feeling well or something. Look inside yourself. You can't lie to yourself, right? It is impossible to lie to yourself. So if I go into the bar because it's my friend's birthday, but I knew going in that I'm going to try to find a way to drink, you can't blame the birthday being at a bar, right? That's a bad example, but my point is, like, you know what your intent is, and if your intent is right, then you got to give yourself the credit saying, okay, you're doing all that you can do today.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of part of the whole fighting thing, which as I thought more and more about that over the years, the path becomes a lot narrower. And you had mentioned we can't lie to ourselves, and 100%. I mean, honesty with ourselves is paramount. To having the life that we want to have. Which if we have the life that we want to have, we won't drink and drug again. We just won't, in my opinion.
Agree.
So being honest with ourselves and as the path narrows, there are certain things that I can't get away with. And the first thing is, the drugs and the alcohol. Can't get away with that. That's the big, elephant in the room when we first start. But even simple things, and this is just a little story about the path narrowing, but I when I was a kid and I was just sober, and my mom, like, every once in a while she'd pull some tissues out of her pocket, and one or two would drop on the floor, and she wouldn't notice it, and I would just walk by it like, not my problem. And so, and then I couldn't get away with that anymore because, I had to pick that up, and I had to do something with it because the path was starting to narrow, like things that didn't matter to me before needed to matter because I had to be honest with myself, and I had to, this goes into another story, but I had to become a useful member of society, which is
Yes.
what this old timer used to say to me, in Adrian, by the way.
Okay.
And anyway, so he would say, be a useful member of society. And I think about that, and I think, you know what? I can't just walk over that. And I can't just go by without picking it up because that's not right. And I need to start doing things that, aren't sort of giving me friction and,
Yeah.
having that little fight inside of myself. So I know it's a very simple example, but
That's a great
and
example.
it's just, the path gets narrower, and the honesty with ourselves becomes that much more apparent in terms of, what works for us and what doesn't work for us, what we can allow with ourselves, and then what we can't allow with ourselves because, we're going against the grain. So, and all that stuff shakes out, over time, which is really cool.
People won't realize how important picking up those tissues are. I tell you what, when I got out of treatment, I finally found this job back in June. I was on cloud nine. I was out of treatment. I was in recovery. I'm working at a recovery facility. Like, couldn't be better. And then as time went on, reality started to set in. And then you have, coworkers that, well, they're coworkers. And their tissue story made me think of, like, I have a trash can in my office and I eat in my office. There's a trash can in the break room. And every single day I come in for the second shift and the thing is overflowing. And I look at it and I'm like, not my problem. I don't put shit in this thing. And I get irritated. I'm like, look at this. It's overflowing. There's crap falling off on the floor. And then I'll walk away. I'm like, no, I ain't doing it. And then I'll walk away and I'm like, son of a bitch. And I go back and I take the trash out and then I put a new bag in it. and it happens a few times a week, man. But I'm not going to let myself go down that road of just, if there's something that you can fix it, and because it will build on other things. So I think that tissue story was a great story, man.
Oh, thank you. I related that story actually, and a friend of mine said to me, or actually typed it to me, because that's how we communicate sometimes these days. But anyway, he said when he interviews people, and I thought this was really cool, when he interviews people, he will put a couple of bits of trash on the floor, like crumpled up paper or something.
Ooh.
So as they walk in the office, if somebody picks it up, then they have potential to be hired. If they don't pick it up, they don't. And I think that's just cool as can be.
That's outstanding. I really like that.
Yeah.
If I'm ever in a hiring role, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. I never would have thought of it, but I think that's just a cool thing. And it's funny because today we're, and I mean just in this time, the tissue story was when I was younger, but in this time, and sometimes it drives me crazy and it just makes me laugh, to myself, at myself. But we have these, pillows on the couch, and sometimes the feathers from inside just, end up laying on the floor or laying on the couch or whatever. And they get dragged around the house, and I'll walk by one and I'll do the same thing you do with the trash can. I'm like, oh shit, I got to go pick that up.
Right.
Like I try to walk by it, I'd love to walk by it. And then all right, dumbass, go pick it up, just because that's the right thing to do. And I can't not do it at this point. So
yeah. Anyway. Yeah. With the trash, like I look at it as like, so you're upset that they fill this thing up and it's overflowing, and yet you're going to walk away just like they did. So what are you telling yourself? Well, this has been great, Daryl. I try to keep it around 40, 45 minutes because, as you said, we're a texting civilization these days. Our attention span is shorter and shorter. So I want people to be able to go to the whole thing. But I did ask if there are any questions, and TJ asked, let's see if I can bring it up here. Did writing the book help you feel better about your recovery? Was it therapeutic? Or were you already in that stage? Maybe is what he's asking before that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that question. That's it was therapeutic, and it was surprisingly therapeutic for me from the perspective of there were a lot of things that I didn't necessarily remember or weren't top of my mind, at that time. As I was writing the book and I started remembering stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, that happened, or oh yeah, that happened. And it was really I'm a big fan of sobriety. Like a lot of sobriety for me was getting the garbage out and taking the garbage out of myself, and letting go of some of those things. So it helped me to just, sort of lay everything out and look at it and remember things. So from that perspective, it was very therapeutic. Feeling better about my recovery. Yeah. I mean, feeling better about my life. And that's, from the perspective mostly of, now I can give back. This is something that I feel like I can give back. And if I could give it away to the world, I would. And if it helped people, I would absolutely do that. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to give it away to the world, but I will say if somebody's not in a position to buy one, I will more than happily send you one. If it's something you want to read about sobriety, whatever, I would do that in a second.
Awesome. Did you, prior to the book, did you have any journaling or anything that you could reference back to, or did you do it all through recall?
It was all through recall. I used to write when I was younger, when I was in really bad places, and I would just write to get things out because I had way too much swirling in my head and I was going to explode. So I used to write from that perspective, but I threw it all away because I didn't want to look at it anymore.
Oh, no.
So anyway, I wrote it all from recall.
Yeah, my last two treatments, I just started journaling like crazy. and I've pulled them out here and there and read a few pages, and sometimes the tears start flowing because those pages remember the pain, that were used to write those words. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I don't necessarily recall them, but I'm so glad I did, and I hope I keep them for a long time, just for reference. And maybe one day I'll be able to say, you know what, I don't need these anymore. That I don't need to reflect, but right now they're pretty important to me, and I still journal to this day. And again, that's something else that especially men that will be like, I don't know about having a diary. It's a journal, dude. Write your stuff down, get it out, and then burn it. If you don't want anybody, if you're afraid somebody's going to read it, burn it. I write in Elder Futhark runes, so nobody can read my crap anyway. So I'd say whatever the hell I want. But
I think that's so cool. I really do. And whatever tools work. I mean, that's the point of life. At some point, sobriety just becomes life. And whatever works for life is what works. And it doesn't have to be anything anybody else does. But I think journaling or just writing. I would take a yellow legal pad and I would just start writing stuff because I couldn't stand it being in me anymore. And that was the relief. It allowed me to be, to let some of that stuff go. You mentioned, coming to tears, if you don't mind, just another quick little thing.
Please.
So, every once in a while, my wife and I will go out on the deck and we'll do it. Sometimes I get up at 4 a.m, or 3 a.m, or whatever. And I'll just go out and look at the stars and and I love that, and looking for shooting stars and that sort of thing. And I'll just sit there and sometimes both my parents are deceased, and my mom's been gone for a long time, but I'll just sit there on the deck and I will talk to them, and I will listen to whatever they're trying to impart to me, and whatever that is. And sometimes I'll just start bawling, and so having those memories, and it's not a sad thing. It's a wonderful thing. It's not a like, oh my God, this is terrible thing. It's, what, I'm grateful for everything that I taught that was good for me, and everything I was taught that was maybe not so good for me. But you know what? They did the best they could. And that's where, that feeling comes from. And it's a grateful thing, that I had my parents for whatever time I did.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I had a brain fart.
It's all good.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, whatever you can do to connect to those emotions, those healthy emotions. Like you said, it's not a bad thing. It's a healthy emotion, and to be able to connect to those things. To be able to laugh for real, and to not have to fake it, especially for me, like going to a family gathering and all I want to do is get the hell out of there. So I go home and find the bottle that I stashed and get back to it. I to truly enjoy things. Like my guilty pleasure is, it's going to not, to some, it might make me sound bad, but Miley and I, we like to watch WWE together. It's our guilty pleasure. So the Royal Rumbles tonight, we're going to watch that, and it's going to be a good time, and it's going to be a sober time, and I'm really looking forward to it. And so it's those little things for sure.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, I whatever, whatever, right? Like I mean, that is just life. And whatever works for any individual, I'm in favor of.
Absolutely.
I don't care who agrees with it, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And that's what we try to do here. I know Lindsay does the same thing when we have people on. We're trying to show so many pathways, even the ones that are similar, and then ones that are completely different. I just, anything that we can put out there that somebody might hear and grab onto, to give them another day of, another brick in that foundation. That's all that matters, man. And that's why we do this. So thank you for coming on and sharing this, Daryl. So at least one person saying that your book is on their list. So I'm going to pick up a copy myself because I'm looking forward to reading that. And again, thanks, man, for coming on. By the way, who you got in the Niners-Lions game tomorrow? Hell yeah.
Uh,
Obviously, I wouldn't have asked that question if I knew it was a Niners shirt under there. But yeah, go
yeah,
Lions,
that's
baby.
excited, man. Thanks so much for having me, Scott. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed our discussion very much, and yeah, thank you so much. And I
Yeah, and
appreciate you taking a peek at the book, and let's make sure we stay in touch.
yeah, absolutely. And the book again is When I Stopped Fighting: The Unexpected Joy of Getting My Head Out of My Ass by Daryl Dittmer. So make sure if you're listening on audio, that's the book to check out. And we hope to have Daryl on again soon.
I'd love it. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate you,
All right,
man.
buddy. Take care, man.
You too, man. Thank you.